Melania Trump had never been one for unnecessary media appearances. Since leaving the White House, she had preferred a quiet life, away from the public's prying eyes. While Donald Trump remained in the political spotlight, making headlines with rallies and social media outbursts, Melania carefully curated her public image, speaking only when necessary. That was why the invitation from The Hard Truth with Vivian Carter had come as a surprise. Vivian Carter was one of the most feared television hosts in America. She was known for her unfiltered interviews, where she left no stone unturned. Some called her a journalist with integrity. Others thought she was a glorified bully. Either way, Vivian had made a career out of cornering her guests, making them squirm under her sharp questioning. Melania had no reason to subject herself to such an interview, except for one thing. For months, the media had speculated about her silence regarding Donald Trump's latest legal troubles and his 2024 election campaign. Was she still supporting him? Did she agree with his policies? Was she planning to divorce him? The headlines were relentless. Melania's mysterious absence. Has she finally had enough? The silent First Lady. Why won't she speak? Sources claim Melania is done with Trump, but is she? She was tired of people assuming they knew her mind. If she didn't speak, they claimed she was weak. If she did, they said she was being forced. No matter what she did, she was trapped in a narrative she didn't control. And that was why she had accepted the invitation. Melania smoothed her dress as she sat in the back seat of the black SUV taking her to the television studio. Her longtime friend and former press advisor, Stephanie Winston Wolkoff, sat beside her, a worried expression on her face. "Are you sure about this, Mel?" Stephanie asked. Melania turned to her with a slight smirk. "You are the one who always says I should speak more, no?" Stephanie sighed. "Yes, but not on this show. Vivian Carter doesn't play fair. She will try to trap you." "I know," Melania said calmly. "But I'm not afraid." Stephanie leaned back, shaking her head. "Well, just be careful. She's going to bring up everything. Donald, your past, your silence, even Barron. She won't hold back." Melania's jaw tightened. Let her try. The television studio was buzzing with energy. The audience was filled with journalists, political analysts, and regular citizens eager to see the showdown. Vivian Carter, dressed in a sharp navy blue suit, stood in the center of the stage, her arms crossed as she waited for her guest. The moment Melania stepped onto the stage, the room erupted in a mix of cheers and murmurs. Melania walked with quiet confidence. Her face was unreadable. She wore a simple yet elegant white dress, her hair cascading in soft waves over her shoulders. She knew the optics of this moment mattered. Vivian extended a hand, which Melania shook firmly before taking her seat. "Mrs. Trump," Vivian began, "thank you for being here. I have to say this is a surprise." Melania gave a small smile. "I like surprises." The audience chuckled. Vivian leaned forward. "Let's not waste any time. The American people have been asking, why have you been so silent? Your husband is in the middle of multiple legal battles, running for president again, and you've been nowhere to be seen. Why?" Melania tilted her head slightly. "I have been seen. You see me now, no?" Vivian pursed her lips. "You know what I mean. Why haven't you spoken out?" Melania's expression remained neutral. "I speak when I have something to say. But the public wants to hear from you," Vivian pressed. "Don't you think you owe them answers?" Melania raised an eyebrow. "Owe them? No, I owe my son a good life. I owe myself peace. But the public? I owe them nothing," the audience murmured. Some nodded in agreement. Others whispered in surprise. Vivian leaned back. "That's an interesting perspective. Some might call it selfish." Melania didn't flinch. People call many things selfish when a woman chooses herself. The audience broke into applause. Vivian narrowed her eyes, sensing that she was losing control of the narrative. "Let's talk about Donald Trump." Melania folded her hands in her lap. "Of course." Vivian's smile was almost predatory. "Do you support his 2024 campaign?" Melania's lips curved into a small smirk. "Why don't you ask him if he supports my goals? Or is it only the wife who must support the husband?" The audience erupted in cheers. Vivian looked momentarily caught off guard, but quickly recovered. "But surely as his wife, you must have an opinion on his leadership." I do, Melania said simply. And what is it? Melania tilted her head. My opinion is mine. Laughter and applause filled the room. Vivian's face tightened. So you refuse to say whether you support him? Melania leaned forward slightly, her gaze direct. Let me ask you something. Miss Carter, your husband, does he support every choice you make? And do you feel the need to announce it to the world? Vivian hesitated. Melania continued, her voice smooth but firm. A marriage is not a campaign. It is two people. And two people do not always agree. But what matters is respect. And I respect my husband. That is all you need to know. The crowd clapped again, and Vivian clenched her jaw, realizing she was dealing with a sharper opponent than she had expected. The interview continued, with Vivian throwing one question after another, but Melania remained poised, giving nothing away that she didn't want to. Then came the question that changed everything. Vivian's voice sharpened. Many people say you were complicit in Donald Trump's policies, that by standing by him, you enabled him. Do you take responsibility for your role in his presidency? Melania's gaze was icy. Did you ask Michelle Obama that when she stood by her husband's policies? Vivian opened her mouth, then closed it. Melania continued, her voice steady. Or Laura Bush? Or Hillary Clinton? Or is this question only for me? The audience roared. Vivian's face hardened, but Melania wasn't finished. I was First Lady, not the President, not his advisor. I had my own initiatives, my own work. If you want to discuss that, I am happy to. But do not ask me to carry the weight of a man's choices when no other First Lady has been asked to do the same. The room exploded in applause. Vivian had no comeback. The clip would go viral within hours. As Melania sat back, a small smile playing on her lips, she finally felt something she hadn't in a long time. Control, and she was going to keep it. Vivian Carter was not one to back down. She was used to dominating conversations, controlling the tempo of an interview, and pushing her guests into uncomfortable territory. But tonight, something was different. Melania Trump was calm, measured, and completely immune to the traps Vivian had carefully laid out. The audience, which had come expecting Melania to fumble, to struggle, was now eating out of her hand, and Vivian knew it. She decided to change tactics. You speak of control, Vivian said, leaning forward. But many would say you lost control the moment you married Donald Trump. You became part of something bigger than yourself. And whether you like it or not, people will always judge you based on what he does. Doesn't that bother you? Melania tilted her head slightly, considering her words. I married a man, not a movement. Vivian arched an eyebrow. And yet that movement defines you. Melania let out a small chuckle. No, you wanted to define me. But I define myself. The audience erupted again. Vivian clenched her jaw, but Melania was not done. I have lived many lives, Miss Carter. I was a girl from Slovenia with big dreams. I was a model, traveling the world, making my own money. I built my name long before I met Donald. And even as First Lady, I had my own causes, my own voice. So do not tell me I am only what my husband does. That is lazy journalism. The crowd gasped. Vivian's face darkened, but before she could respond, Melania leaned forward. I have a question for you, Ms. Carter. Vivian blinked. Me? Yes, Melania smiled, but it was sharp. You have built your career tearing people down. You call it journalism, but sometimes it looks more like entertainment. Vivian bristled. I report the truth. Melania nodded. You shape the truth. You take a person, you take a headline, and you make them fight each other. And the winner is always you. The audience erupted in cheers. Vivian opened her mouth, but for the first time in her career, she had no immediate response. The interview ended with Vivian forcing a tight smile and thanking Melania for her time, but the damage was done. Within minutes, clips of Melania's comebacks flooded social media. I married a man, not a movement. That is lazy journalism. You shape the truth. Memes, reaction videos, and praise poured in from unexpected places. Even people who had never supported Melania found themselves impressed by her composure and wit. Meanwhile, in her dressing room, Melania sat with Stephanie, sipping tea. That was a disaster for her, Stephanie said with a grin. Melania simply nodded. I only spoke my truth. Stephanie laughed. Well, your truth is trending worldwide. Melania took another sip of tea, her eyes twinkling. For the first time in a long while, she had spoken on her terms. And the world had listened. The next morning, The Hard Truth with Vivian Carter released a statement. We stand by our journalism and our commitment to tough but fair interviews. But the damage was done. Melania Trump, the woman who had been labeled silent, weak, complicit, had flipped the narrative. And as the world debated her words, one thing was certain. She had taken control of her story, and she wasn't giving it back. By January 20th, 2025, the world had changed once again. Donald J. Trump was back in the White House. The 2024 election had been brutal. His opponents had fought him with everything they had. The media had declared him politically dead multiple times. But as always, Trump defied expectations. He roared back with his signature rallies, populist messaging, and an unshakable base. And beside him, though the world hadn't expected it, stood Melania Trump. When the election results came in, some speculated that she wouldn't return to the White House. Rumors swirled that she would remain in New York with Barron. But on Inauguration Day, there she was, stepping out of the motorcade in a regal navy blue dress, her expression unreadable as she walked alongside the man she had once again become First Lady to. Some said she looked more powerful than before. Others said she looked colder. But one thing was clear. Melania Trump was no longer the woman they thought they knew. The White House felt familiar, yet different. Melania walked through the East Wing, taking it all in. The last time she had been here, she had felt trapped, defined by roles she hadn't chosen. But this time was different. Stephanie walked beside her, clipboard in hand. We have to discuss your new initiatives. The press is already speculating. Some think you'll revive Be Best, others... No, Melania said simply. Stephanie paused. No? I want something new. Melania turned, her gaze sharp. This time I will not be a symbol. I will be a force. Stephanie raised an eyebrow. Okay, I like that. But what does that mean? Melania looked out the window, deep in thought. The media does not control me. The people who doubted me do not control me. I have power, and this time I will use it. Stephanie grinned. Now that is the Melania I like. While Melania was carving out her own place, Donald was back to his usual self, holding rallies, making executive orders, battling the press. But behind closed doors, their relationship had shifted. One night in the private residence, Donald paced as he read through reports. They want me to talk about Ukraine again. It's a disaster. The media is twisting everything. Melania, seated on the couch, watched him with an amused expression. What? He asked, noticing her smirk. You are still fighting everyone, she said. Still the same. Donald shrugged. That's why I win. Melania tilted her head. No, that is why you fight. Winning is different. Donald narrowed his eyes. And what do you call what you did on that interview last year? That was winning? Yes, Melania said simply. Because I did not fight. I let them fight themselves. Donald chuckled. You're something else, you know that? Melania gave a small smile. I know. The media was in a frenzy over Melania's return. Will she stay silent again? Does she secretly control Trump behind the scenes? Melania 2.0, the First Lady who plays by her own rules. Reporters begged for an interview, but Melania refused them all. Instead, she made strategic appearances, choosing when and how she spoke. Then one day, Vivian Carter, now hosting a primetime news special, released an exposé. The truth about Melania, a silent operator or a reluctant First Lady. Clips of her old interview with Melania played. The segment dissected every move she had made since returning to the White House. When Stephanie showed Melania the coverage, she laughed softly. They are still trying to figure me out, she said. Stephanie smirked, and they never will. Melania simply sipped her tea. It was a crisp autumn evening when Melania made her boldest move yet. She stepped onto the stage at a women's leadership event. Her first major speech since returning to the White House. The audience was filled with politicians, business leaders, and the media. She adjusted the microphone and began. For many years, people have spoken for me. They have told my story. They have guessed my thoughts. They have shaped my silence into whatever suited them. She paused, letting her words settle. But today, I tell you this. I speak when I choose. I act when it matters, and I will not be defined by anyone but myself." The audience erupted in applause. The headlines would be all over the world the next day. Melania Trump, the most powerful First Lady in history? She smiled slightly. She had won, and this time it was on her terms. She was different, more decisive, more strategic, and most importantly, more powerful. But as she was redefining herself, the political climate was more volatile than ever. Even Donald began to take notice. "You're making waves," he said one evening, flipping through a stack of newspapers that featured her name more prominently than his. Melania, sitting across from him in the residence, simply sipped her tea. "Good." Donald smirked. "People are saying you have your own agenda." She looked up, meeting his gaze. "I do." Donald leaned forward, intrigued. "And what exactly is that?" Melania's expression remained unreadable. Legacy. If Melania had been reluctant in her first term as First Lady, she was now embracing the role with an iron will. She rebranded Be Best into something much larger, expanding beyond anti-bullying into global women's leadership, child welfare and media accountability. She formed alliances with powerful businesswomen, lobbied for initiatives that protected children from online exploitation, and launched an educational program that gained international traction. Soon, world leaders were taking her meetings just as seriously as Donald's. At a diplomatic summit in Geneva, where she was invited as a keynote speaker, a journalist asked, "Mrs. Trump, do you see yourself as simply an advocate, or do you have political ambitions of your own?" Melania smiled slightly. "I see myself as someone who does not need a title to lead." The response made headlines. Melania Trump, the First Lady who might be more than that. After months of strategic silence, Melania finally agreed to another interview. And not just any interview, she agreed to sit down with Vivian Carter. The world was stunned. After their explosive first interview in 2024, no one had expected Melania to ever face Vivian again. But the First Lady had her reasons. She was now at the peak of her influence, and she knew one thing: if she could control the narrative here, she could control it anywhere. When the cameras started rolling, Vivian wasted no time. "Mrs. Trump, you've become one of the most talked about First Ladies in modern history. Many say you are more active this time around. Why is that?" Melania gave a small smile. "Because I choose to be." Vivian leaned forward. "But why now? In your first term, you were criticized for being silent. Now you seem to be taking control. What changed?" Melania's eyes sharpened. "I changed." Vivian nodded, sensing an opening. "Some say you're setting yourself up for a future in politics. Is that true?" Melania's lips twitched. "People say many things. But do you say it?" Melania tilted her head. "Let me ask you, Ms. Carter, why do you assume that power must always lead to politics? Can a woman not simply hold influence without needing a title?" Vivian hesitated. Melania continued, her voice steady. "I do not need a campaign. I do not need to shout. My actions speak. And those who listen, listen." The internet exploded. Melania Trump, the most influential woman in America. The interview solidified her new status, not just as the First Lady, but as a power in her own right. If you enjoyed this story, do well to share this story out to someone who might be strengthened by it. Kindly join our community by hitting the subscribe button for more inspiring and uplifting stories. God bless you.